The morning light filtering through Norah's small basement window carried with it an ominous quality that she couldn't quite shake. She had learned to read the atmosphere of the Ashworth household like a weather vane, and today felt different. Charged with a tension that made her stomach clench as she prepared breakfast. Cordelia Ashworth swept into the kitchen at precisely 8 o'clock, her silk robe billowing behind her like storm clouds. Her face was flushed with an excitement that Norah had learned to fear, the kind that usually preceded some new form of torment. "Norah," Cordelia's voice dripped with false sweetness, "I seem to be missing something very important. My limited edition Hermes bag. The one I purchased just last week for $15,000 has mysteriously vanished from my dressing room." Norah's hand stilled over the coffee she was preparing. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Ashworth. Have you checked your other closets? Sometimes things get moved during cleaning. Don't you dare suggest I've misplaced it." Cordelia snapped, her mask of civility dropping instantly. "Now that bag was in my dressing room yesterday morning when I left for my spa appointment. The only person who had access to my room while I was gone was you." The accusation hit Norah like a physical blow. "Mrs. Ashworth, I would never take anything. I didn't steal your bag. I only went into your room to dust and vacuum just like always." "Of course you'd deny it," Bianca chimed in, appearing in the doorway with her phone already. "Recording. This is going to be such great content for my social media. Maid caught stealing from employer. My followers will eat this up." Norah felt the walls closing in around her. "Please, you have to believe me. I've worked for your family for 2 years, and I've never taken so much as a penny that wasn't mine. I wouldn't steal from you." "2 years of planning," Cordelia interrupted, her voice rising to carry throughout the house. "2 years of gaining our trust so you could steal from us. You've made a grave mistake, you little thief." The front doorbell rang, and Cordelia's smile turned predatory. Perfect timing. "I've called the police, and I've also invited some friends over to witness this. I want everyone to see what happens when someone betrays our kindness." Norah's heart hammered against her ribs as heavy footsteps approached the kitchen. 2 uniformed officers entered, their expressions stern and businesslike. Behind them came Mrs. Petton and her daughter, both wearing expressions of scandalized delight. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," Cordelia began, her voice now trembling with manufactured emotion. "This young woman has stolen a very expensive handbag from my personal belongings. I trusted her with access to my home, and she has violated that trust in the most despicable way." The older officer stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, we'll need to search your belongings in your room. Do you consent to this search?" Norah's mouth went dry. She knew they would find nothing because she hadn't taken anything. But the humiliation of being searched like a common criminal in front of these people made her feel sick. "Yes, officer, you can search. Whatever you need to. You won't find anything, because I didn't take Mrs. Ashworth's bag." As the officers began their methodical search of her tiny basement room, turning over her few possessions with clinical efficiency, Norah stood in the kitchen surrounded by hostile faces. Bianca continued filming, providing commentary for her social media followers about the drama unfolding in real time. Mrs. Petton leaned closer to Cordelia, speaking in a stage whisper clearly meant for Norah to hear. "I told you last night that girl looks suspicious. People from her background, they can't help themselves when they see nice things." The search yielded nothing, just as Norah knew it would. The officers returned to the kitchen empty-handed, but Cordelia was far from finished.
"Oh, she must have hidden it somewhere else or sold it already,"
Cordelia declared. "Officers, I want her arrested for theft. I have security cameras that will show she was the only one with access to my room." "Mrs. Ashworth," the younger officer said carefully, "without physical evidence or video of the actual theft, we can't make an arrest based solely on access and opportunity." Cordelia's face flushed red with fury. "Fine, then I'm firing her immediately, and making sure she never works in this city again. Get out of my house, you thieving little rat. Don't expect a reference, and don't expect to find work anywhere decent. I'll make sure everyone knows what you are." Norah felt something inside her chest crack and splinter. 2 years of enduring Cordelia's cruelty, 2 years of swallowing her pride to keep this job that barely paid enough to help with her mother's medical bills, and it was ending like this. With false accusations and public humiliation, Mrs. Ashworth, please. Norah tried one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. I need this job. My mother is sick and I can't afford to lose the income. I swear to you I didn't take your bag. Your sob story doesn't interest me, Cordelia sneered. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave my property. If you're not gone by then, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. As Norah climbed the stairs to her basement room, for the last time she could hear Bianca's voice behind her, still narrating for her phone camera. And that's how you handle thieves in your house, guys. Zero tolerance for dishonest help. In her tiny room, Norah sat on the narrow bed and stared at her hands. They were still calloused from 2 years of scrubbing floors and cleaning surfaces. Still bore the small burns from cooking elaborate meals for people who treated her like she was invisible. Now they shook as she tried to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Her mother's condition had worsened overnight, and they needed to discuss adjusting her treatment plan. The irony was almost too much to bear. Just when her mother needed her most, Norah had lost the only source of income that made the medical bills possible. She packed her few belongings into a single suitcase, the same one she had arrived with 2 years ago, full of hope and determination to make a better life. Now it felt like carrying the weight of all her failures. As she prepared to leave, Norah took one last look around the basement room that had been her home. Despite everything, she had tried to make it comfortable, adding small touches like a plant on the windowsill and a few books on the narrow shelf. Now she was leaving with less hope than she had arrived with, and no idea where she would go or how she would survive. The sound of laughter from upstairs reminded her that for the Ashworths, this was merely entertainment. Her life falling apart was just another source of amusement for people who had never known what it meant to struggle for anything. Outside the mansion, Norah stood on the sidewalk with her suitcase, looking back at the grand facade that had been both her prison and her lifeline. The morning sun felt harsh on her face, and she realized that for the first time in 2 years, she had nowhere specific she needed to be. But as she turned to walk away, she didn't notice the black sedan that had been parked across the street. For the past hour, or the man inside who had watched the entire scene unfold through the mansion's windows, Julian Rosmore had arrived just in time to witness the destruction of the young woman who had captured his attention the day before. And he was not pleased with what he had seen. Julian Rosmore had built his empire on the principle that information was power. Right now, he possessed information that would change everything for the young woman walking away from the Ashworth mansion with nothing but a battered suitcase. He had arrived at the mansion that morning with a specific purpose. After having his assistant Elena investigate discreetly, he had learned that Norah Chen worked for the Ashworths, the same family whose reputation for cruelty toward their staff was well known in certain circles. What he hadn't expected was to witness her public humiliation and wrongful termination. Julian stepped out of his sedan just as Norah reached the corner, her shoulders squared despite the obvious defeat in her posture. There was something about her dignified retreat that stirred the same protective instinct he had felt at the shopping plaza. Miss Chen. Norah turned, startled to hear her name. When she saw the impeccably dressed man from the plaza approaching, her eyes widened with recognition and mortification. Of all the people to witness her shame, it had to be him. I'm sorry, I don't think we were properly introduced yesterday, Julian said, extending his hand. Julian Rosmore. The name hit Norah like a bolt of lightning. Everyone in the city knew Julian Rosmore, the billionaire CEO whose business empire touched nearly every aspect of urban life. The man whose company logo she saw on buildings throughout the downtown district. The man she had bumped into at the plaza was one of the most powerful people in the country. Mr. Rosmore, she managed, shaking his hand with fingers that trembled slightly. I apologize again for yesterday, and I'm sorry you had to witness what just happened. It's not what it looked like. On the contrary, Julian said, his gray eyes steady on hers. It was exactly what it looked like. A vindictive woman destroying someone's life for her own entertainment. Norah blinked, taken aback by his directness. You don't understand. She accused me of stealing, and without proof of my innocence, people will believe her version. I don't need proof of your innocence, Julian replied calmly. I have proof of her guilt. Before Norah could process what he meant, Julian retrieved his phone and showed her a series of photographs. They showed Cordelia Ashworth at an upscale restaurant the previous evening, the missing Hermes bag clearly visible on the table beside her plate. "I had dinner at the same restaurant last night," Julian explained. "When my assistant researched your employment, I became curious about your employers. These photos were taken at 9:30 last night, well after you had supposedly stolen the bag." Norah stared at the images, feeling a mix of relief and fresh anger. She knew exactly where her bag was. She planned this whole thing. The question is, what you want to do about it? The weight of the question settled between them. Norah looked back toward the mansion, then at the man who held the power to restore her reputation with a few phone calls. But she also understood that accepting his help would create a debt she might never be able to repay. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Julian considered her question carefully. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Perhaps it was the way she had helped the elderly woman at the plaza without thought of reward. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity she maintained even in the face of public humiliation. Or perhaps it was the realization that in a world full of people who wanted something from him, here was someone who asked for nothing. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I have the power to do it. What would you want in return?"
Ow.
Julian smiled slightly. "Have dinner with me tonight? Not as payment, but because I'd like to know more about a woman who apologizes to strangers and helps elderly ladies with their shopping." Norah felt heat rise in her cheeks. The most powerful man in the city was asking her to dinner, and she was standing on a sidewalk with all her possessions in a single suitcase, unemployed and practically homeless. "Mr. Rosmore, I appreciate your offer to help, but I'm not in a position to have dinner at the kind of restaurants you probably frequent. I don't have appropriate clothes, and honestly, I'm not even sure where I'm going to sleep tonight." "Then let's solve the immediate problems first." Julian pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Alina, I need you to book the penthouse suite at the Grand Metropolitan for Miss Chen indefinitely. Also, arrange for a complete wardrobe consultation this afternoon, business and evening wear." Norah watched him make arrangements for her life with the casual efficiency of someone accustomed to solving problems with money and authority. It should have bothered her, this assumption that he could simply take control. Instead, she found herself grateful that someone finally seemed to care about her welfare. "I can't let you pay for all this," she protested weakly. "Consider it an advance on your salary." "My salary?" Julian's smile became more pronounced. "Position with Rosmore International. Personal assistant to the CEO. The salary is substantially more than what the Ashworths were paying you. And the working conditions are significantly more humane." Norah felt dizzy. 24 hours ago, she had been scrubbing floors and enduring daily humiliation. Now, she was being offered a job that would solve all her financial problems and more. "I don't have any experience as an executive assistant," she said honestly. "But you have experience managing difficult people under pressure, organizing complex schedules, and maintaining grace under adversity. Those are the skills that matter most." As they talked, Norah became aware that several people had recognized Julian and were watching their interaction with obvious curiosity. The idea that she would soon be photographed with him, possibly ending up in gossip columns, added another layer of surreal to an already impossible day. "There is one condition," Julian said, his expression becoming more serious. "I want to publicly clear your name regarding the theft accusation. That means confronting Cordelia Ashworth with evidence of her lies and ensuring that everyone who witnessed your humiliation also witnesses your vindication." The prospect of facing Cordelia again made Norah's stomach clench, but she also felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of standing up for herself instead of simply enduring. "When?" she asked. "Now." Julian's sedan pulled up to the Ashworth mansion just as Cordelia was saying goodbye to her guests, still glowing with satisfaction from the morning's entertainment. Her expression changed dramatically when she saw Julian Rosmore stepping out of the car, followed by the young woman she had just publicly destroyed. "Mr. Rosmore," Cordelia said, quickly arranging her features into what she probably thought was a welcoming smile. "What an unexpected pleasure. Hope you're not here about that unfortunate business with my former employee." Actually, that's exactly why I'm here, Julian replied, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. I believe you owe Miss Chen an apology. Cordelia's smile faltered. I'm afraid I don't understand. The girl is a thief, and I have every right to dismiss her for stealing from me. Julian held up his phone, showing the photographs from the restaurant. These were taken last night at 9:30. Your bag wasn't stolen, Mrs. Ashworth. You knew exactly where it was when you chose to destroy this young woman's reputation for your own amusement. The color drained from Cordelia's face as she stared at the evidence of her deception. Behind her, Bianca lowered her phone, suddenly realizing that her social media content might not have the ending she had anticipated. I want you to call the police back, Julian continued, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. I want you to inform them that you made a mistake, that the bag was never stolen. I want you to apologize to Miss Chen in front of everyone who witnessed her humiliation this morning. The gathered neighbors and remaining guests watched with fascination as one of the most powerful men in the city confronted the Ashworth family on behalf of their former maid. It was a reversal of fortune so dramatic that Norah could hardly believe it was happening. But as she looked at Julian's determined expression and felt the strength of his support behind her, she realized that her life was about to change in ways she had never dared to imagine. The penthouse suite at the Grand Metropolitan was larger than the entire Ashworth mansion basement, and infinitely more luxurious than anywhere Norah had ever imagined staying. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while marble surfaces and crystal fixtures caught the afternoon light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across cream-colored walls. Norah stood in the center of the living room, still holding her worn suitcase, trying to process the magnitude of change that had occurred in just a few hours. This morning, she had been a disgraced servant with no prospects. Now she was the personal assistant to Julian Rosmore, staying in accommodations that cost more per night than she used to make in a month. The doorbell chimed, and Norah opened it to find a woman in her 30s with perfectly styled auburn hair and an armload of garment bags. Miss Chen. I'm Miranda Wells from Sartorial Solutions. Mr. Rosmore asked me to provide you with a complete professional wardrobe. Miranda entered the suite with practiced efficiency, laying out the garment bags on the massive sofa. I've brought selections based on your measurements and the requirements of your new position. As Miranda unveiled dress after dress, suit after suit, each more beautiful than the last, Norah felt overwhelmed by the quality and expense of the clothing. These weren't just work clothes. They were the kind of garments that transformed the wearer, that commanded respect and attention. It seems like too much, Norah said, running her fingers over a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than she used to make in several months. Mr. Rosmore was very specific about ensuring you have everything you need to succeed in your new role, Miranda replied. Image is crucial in the business world, Miss Chen. People make judgments within seconds of meeting someone. These clothes ensure those judgments work in your favor. The transformation process took hours. Miranda helped Norah select outfits for various business situations, from board meetings to client dinners. A hairstylist arrived to update Norah's simple cut into a sophisticated style that framed her face elegantly. A makeup artist taught her techniques for creating polished looks that enhanced her natural beauty without appearing overdone. As the afternoon progressed, Norah watched herself change in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked confident, successful, like someone who belonged in boardrooms and executive offices. It was remarkable how much appearance could alter not just how others saw her, but how she saw herself. You clean up beautifully, Miranda said with satisfaction as she packed up the unused garments. Mr. Rosmore has excellent instincts about people. After Miranda left, Norah found herself alone with her reflection and her thoughts. The phone call to her mother had been the bright spot in an otherwise surreal day. Dr. Wright had been amazed. When Norah explained that she would now be able to afford the more aggressive treatment options they had discussed, her mother's weak but joyful voice had brought tears to her eyes. I'm so proud of you, darling, her mother had whispered. I always knew you were meant for something better than scrubbing floors. But as the evening approached and the time for dinner with Julian drew near, Norah felt anxiety building in her chest. She had transformed her appearance, but underneath the expensive clothes and professional styling, She was still the same woman who had been publicly humiliated that morning. What if she said the wrong thing? What if he realized he had made a mistake? Julian arrived at precisely 7 o'clock, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark blue suit that emphasized his tall frame and broad shoulders. When Norah opened the door, his gray eyes swept over her with obvious appreciation. "You look stunning," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "That feeling will pass," Julian assured her as they rode the elevator down to his waiting car. "Confidence is something you build, not something you're born with." The restaurant Julian had chosen was intimate and elegant, the kind of place where conversations were conducted in hushed tones and every detail spoke of refinement. As they were seated at a table overlooking the city lights, Norah marveled at how different this evening was from any she had ever experienced. "Tell me about yourself," Julian said once they had ordered. "Not your work history, but who you are. What you dream about when you're not worried about survival." The question caught Norah off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked. About her hopes and dreams that she had almost forgotten she had any. "I used to want to be a teacher," she said slowly. "I was studying education before my mother became ill, and I had to drop out of college to work. Love the idea of helping children learn, of being part of their growth and development." "What stopped you from going back to school?" "Money, mostly. In time. Working for the Ashworths left me exhausted at the end of each day. It was hard to imagine having energy for anything else." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "What if I told you that Rosmore International has an education foundation that provides scholarships for employees who want to complete their degrees?" Norah stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. We believe in investing in our people's potential, not just their current skills." As the evening progressed, Norah found herself relaxing despite the elegant surroundings. Julian was an excellent conversationalist, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories that revealed glimpses of the man behind the business empire. She learned that he had grown up working class, that his success had come through a combination of intelligence, determination, and carefully calculated risks. "What about you?" Norah asked during dessert. "What do you dream about when you're not building your empire?" Julian's expression became more serious. "Honestly, dream about finding someone who sees Julian the man, not Julian the corporation. Someone who isn't trying to get something from me or impress me with their connections. That must be lonely." "Right. It is," he admitted. "Success has a way of isolating you from genuine human connection. People treat you differently when they know you have power over their circumstances." Norah considered this. "Is that why you helped me today? Because I wasn't trying to get anything from you?" "Partly," Julian said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "But also because I was impressed by your character. The way you helped that elderly woman at the plaza, the dignity you maintained even when Cordelia was humiliating you. Those aren't qualities you can fake or buy." Touch of his hand sent warmth up Norah's arm and made her heart race. She was attracted to him, there was no denying that, but she was also aware of the vast gulf between their circumstances. Even with her new job and transformed appearance, she was still the woman who had been scrubbing floors that morning. She said carefully, "I'm grateful for everything you've done for me today, more grateful than I can express. But I want you to know that I'm not naive about the differences between us." "What differences?" he asked, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. "You're one of the most powerful men in the country. I'm someone who was falsely accused of theft this morning. You live in a penthouse. I lived in a basement. You've always had choices. I've spent years just trying to survive." Julian was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "Those differences in circumstance don't define who we are as people, Norah, and they're not permanent. They're intelligent, hardworking, and principled. Given the right opportunities, there's no limit to what you can achieve. And if I achieve those things, if I become successful in my own right, what happens to us then?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was quite ready to fully explore. Julian lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. "Then we'll find out if what's growing between us is real or just circumstance," he said softly, As they left the restaurant and walked through the quiet city streets, gosh, Norah felt as though she was living in a dream. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she could save enough money to visit her mother in the hospital. Now she was walking hand in hand with a billionaire who spoke about their future as though it was inevitable. But as they paused in front of the hotel, Julian's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression darkened as he read it, and Norah felt a chill of premonition. "What is it?" she asked. "Cordelia Ashworth," he said grimly, not accepting defeat. "As gracefully as I hoped, she's hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on you. She's threatening to go to the press with a story about how I'm sleeping with my maid." Norah felt her stomach drop. She can't do that. She can try. And in the process, she could. Destroy both our reputations and your mother's peace of mind. Julian's jaw tightened with determination. She's made one crucial mistake. She's forgotten that I didn't get where I am by backing down from fights. As they stood there under the city lights, Norah realized that her fairy tale transformation was about to face its first real test. Cordelia Ashworth wasn't finished with her revenge. The stakes were about to get much higher than either of them had anticipated. The attack came at dawn, delivered through every major news outlet and social media platform in the city. Norah woke to her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from reporters, notifications from news apps, and text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Billionaire's made mistress. How Julian Rosmore rescued his new plaything screamed the headline of the city's most notorious gossip publication. The article, clearly fed by Cordelia Ashworth, painted Norah as a manipulative gold digger who had seduced Julian after he caught her stealing from her former employers. The photographs were the most damaging part. Someone had managed to capture shots of Julian and Norah at dinner the night before, their hands touching across the table, his lips pressed to her palm. Out of context, the images seemed to confirm every sordid detail of Cordelia's narrative. Norah sat on the edge of the hotel bed, reading article after article that twisted the truth beyond recognition. The woman described in these stories bore no resemblance to her actual life or character. She was portrayed as a scheming seductress who had orchestrated her own firing to gain Julian's sympathy, a master manipulator who had used her supposed innocence to ensnare one of the country's most eligible bachelors. The worst part was the comments section of each article, filled with vicious attacks on her appearance, her background, and her supposed motives. Strangers felt entitled to judge her morality, her intelligence, and her worth as a person based on nothing but gossip and carefully angled photographs. Her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. "Don't read any more of it, were?" His first words. "Too late," Norah said, her voice hollow. "Julian, this is going to destroy you. Your business relationships, your reputation, everything you've built. I've weathered worse storms than Cordelia Ashworth," Julian replied, his voice steady and determined. "The question is whether you're strong enough to weather this one with me." Before Norah could answer, there was a knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a hotel uniform holding a massive bouquet of flowers. "I have to go," she told Julian. "Someone's at the door." But when she opened the door, instead of hotel staff, she found herself face to face with a reporter and photographer who immediately began firing questions and snapping pictures. "Miss Chen, is it true that you targeted Julian Rosmore for his money?" the reporter demanded, pushing forward into the doorway. "How long have you been planning this seduction?" Norah slammed the door shut, her heart pounding. Within minutes, there were more voices in the hallway, more cameras, more people trying to catch her in unflattering moments or unguarded statements. She was trapped. Julian arrived within an hour, accompanied by a team of security personnel who cleared the hallway and established a perimeter around Norah's floor. When he entered the suite, his face was dark with anger. "They've turned you into a prisoner," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I'm so sorry, Norah. I should have anticipated this. You couldn't have known she would go this far," Norah said. But even as she spoke, she wondered if that was true. Julian moved in a world where every action had consequences, where enemies were always looking for weaknesses to exploit. Maybe he should have known that associating with her would make her a target. "We have options," Julian said, holding her. at arm's length to look into her eyes. My legal team is preparing defamation suits against Cordelia in every publication that ran her lies without verification. My public relations firm is crafting a response that will tell our side of the story, our side of the story, the truth, that I was impressed by your character and integrity. I offered you a job based on merit, and that any personal relationship between us developed naturally from mutual respect and attraction. Norah pulled away from him, moving to the window, to look down at the crowd of reporters that had gathered on the street below. Julian, even if we win the legal battles, even if we prove that Cordelia lied about the theft, the damage is done. People will always wonder if there's some truth to her story. Your board of directors, your business partners, they'll question your judgment. Let them question it. I know what's true, and more importantly, I know what I want. What do you want? Norah asked, turning to face him. Julian crossed the room to stand in front of her, his hands coming up to frame her face. I want you, Norah. Not as my employee, not as some charitable project, but as my partner, in business and in life. The intensity in his gray eyes took her breath away. Julian, we've known each other for 2 days. I've known you long enough to see who you really are. I've seen your strength, your compassion, your integrity. I've seen how you handle crisis and how you treat people who can't do anything for you. Those are the qualities that matter in a partner. And what if the scandal destroys your business? Then we'll build something new together. But I won't let fear of other people's opinions dictate my choices. I've spent too many years being careful, being strategic, putting business considerations ahead of personal happiness. Before Norah could respond, Julian's security chief appeared at the door with urgent news. Sir, we have a problem. Mrs. Ashworth has scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. She's promising to reveal more damaging information about Miss Chen. Julian's expression hardened. What kind of information? Unknown, sir. But she's claiming to have documents and witnesses that will prove Miss Chen has a history of targeting wealthy employers. Norah felt the blood drain from her face. There were no such documents or witnesses because no such history existed. But that didn't mean Cordelia couldn't fabricate them. With enough money and motivation, anything could be made to look real. She's going to destroy me completely, Norah whispered. No, Julian said firmly. She's going to try. But she's made a crucial miscalculation. What's that? Julian's smile was sharp and predatory. She thinks I became successful by playing defense. She's about to learn what happens when I go on the attack. Within an hour, Julian's team had transformed the hotel suite into a war room. Lawyers, investigators, and public relations experts worked frantically to gather information and prepare responses. Alina, Julian's assistant, arrived with files that detailed every aspect of the Ashworth family's finances and business dealings. Cordelia Ashworth has been living beyond her means for years, Alina reported. Her husband's real estate business is failing, and they've been using credit and loans to maintain their lifestyle. There are also some questionable charitable donations that look more like money laundering than philanthropy. And Bianca? Julian asked. Trust fund baby with a serious shopping addiction and a history of minor legal troubles that daddy's money has made disappear. DUI arrests, assault charges from altercations at nightclubs, tax evasion issues. Julian nodded grimly. What about the husband? Richard Ashworth is in deep trouble. His construction company has been cutting corners on safety inspections, and there are at least 3 ongoing investigations into building code violations. One of his buildings had a balcony collapse last year that injured several people. As the information poured in, Norah began to understand the magnitude of Julian's resources and influence. He wasn't just defending her, he was conducting a comprehensive investigation into the family that had tried to destroy her reputation. This feels wrong, Norah said quietly. Using their problems against them makes us just as bad as they are. Julian looked up from the documents spread across the coffee table. Norah, they fired the first shot. Cordelia isn't just attacking your reputation, she's threatening your mother's peace of mind and your future prospects. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, but what if we're wrong? What if fighting back just makes everything worse? Stood and moved to where she sat by the window, taking her hands in his. Then we face the consequences together. But I won't stand by and watch them destroy you with lies when I have the power to stop it." Elena's phone buzzed, and her expression grew urgent as she read the message. "Sir, Cordelia's press conference has been moved up to 1 o'clock. She's claiming she has video evidence of Miss Chen stealing from previous employers." "It's impossible," Norah said immediately. "I've never stolen anything from anyone." "Of course you haven't," Julian replied. "Which means whatever she's planning to show is fabricated. Elena, I want our technical team to analyze any video she presents. If it's doctored, I want proof within the hour." As noon approached, Norah found herself pacing the hotel suite like a caged animal. The reporters outside had multiplied, and she could see news vans from every major network lining the street. The story had grown beyond local gossip into a national scandal. With social media buzzing about the billionaire and his maid, "I can't let you sacrifice your reputation for me," Norah said suddenly, stopping in front of Julian. "I should just disappear. Leave the city, change my name, start over somewhere else, and let them win. Let Cordelia's lies become the accepted truth." Julian shook his head. "That's not who you are, Norah. You don't run from bullies." "How do you?" "You know who I am? We met 2 days ago. I know because I've seen you in crisis twice now, and both times you've shown grace under pressure. I know because you were more concerned about my reputation than your own. I know because when you had nothing, you still helped a stranger with her shopping bags." The sincerity in his voice almost broke her resolve, but Norah knew she had to. Be realistic about their situation. Even if we survive this scandal, what kind of future can we have? You're a public figure, and I'll always be the woman who is accused of seducing you for money. Then we change the narrative, Julian said. We show them who we really are. Before Norah could ask what he meant, Elena announced that Cordelia's press conference was beginning. They gathered around the television to watch as Cordelia, dressed in black as though attending a funeral, approached a podium surrounded by microphones and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cordelia began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "I stand before you today as a victim of a calculated deception. The young woman you've seen photographed with Mr. Julian Rosmore is not the innocent victim. She pretends to be." Cordelia held up a manila envelope. "I have here documentation proving that Norah Chen has a pattern of targeting wealthy families for employment, gaining their trust, and then stealing valuable items. This is not her first theft, merely her most ambitious." Norah watched in horror as Cordelia produced what appeared to be police reports and employment records from other families, all detailing similar accusations of theft and manipulation. The documents looked official, complete with letterheads and signatures. "She seduced Mr. Rosmore as part of an elaborate scheme to gain access to his wealth and influence," Cordelia continued. "I fear that this poor man has become the victim of a master manipulator who preys on the kindness of others." As the press conference continued, Cordelia fielding questions and producing more fabricated evidence, Norah felt her world collapsing. Around her, the lies were so detailed, so convincing, that even she might have believed them if she didn't know her own history. "It's all fake," she whispered, but even as she said it, she wondered how many people would believe Cordelia's version of events. Julian's phone rang, and he answered with a sharp, "What?" After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to his team. "Our technical analysis confirms that the documents are forgeries created within the last 48 hours. The police reports reference cases that don't exist in official databases." "Can we prove that publicly?" Elena asked. "We can, but it will take time. Meanwhile, the damage from this press conference will spread across every news outlet and social media platform." Norah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the attack against her. She's going to win, isn't she? Even if we prove the documents are fake, people will always wonder if there's some truth to her claims. Julian knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands firmly in his. "Look at me, Norah. Cordelia Ashworth has made a fatal mistake. Police underestimated both of us." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time to stop playing defense and show the world exactly who we're dealing with." Julian stood and addressed his team. "I want everything we've gathered on the Ashworth family prepared for immediate release. Financial records, legal troubles, the building safety violations, all of it. If Cordelia wants to play dirty, we'll..." Show the public what dirty really looks like. Sir, Alina said carefully, releasing that information could be seen as vindictive. It might make you look petty. Then we don't release it as an attack, Julian replied, his expression calculating. We release it as context. Background information that helps explain why Cordelia Ashworth might be motivated to fabricate evidence against someone who threatened her carefully constructed facade. As Julian's team sprang into action, preparing what would essentially be a counterattack that would devastate the Ashworth family's reputation, Norah felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. Julian was fighting for her with every resource at his disposal, but she wondered what the cost would be for both of them. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was about to discover whether love and truth could triumph over money and malice, or whether some wars left everyone wounded, regardless of who claimed victory. The war room atmosphere in the hotel suite intensified as Julian's team prepared their response to Cordelia's devastating press conference. Phones rang constantly, documents were analyzed and cross-referenced, and strategies were debated with military precision. In the center of it all, Norah felt like the eye of a hurricane, surrounded by chaos but strangely calm. "I have an idea," she said suddenly. Her voice cutting through the organized mayhem. Julian looked up from a stack of financial records. "What is it? What if we don't fight fire with fire? What if we do something completely unexpected?" Lena paused in her typing, such as... Norah stood and moved to the center of the room, her mind racing with a plan that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. What if we tell the truth? All of it. Not as a defensive response to Cordelia's lies, but as our own story. "We are telling the truth," Julian said, confused. "No, we're defending against lies. That's different." Norah's voice grew stronger as her idea crystallized. "What if we hold our own press conference? Not to attack the Ashworths, but to share our actual story. How we met. Why you helped me. What's real between us." Julian's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "You want to control the narrative by being completely transparent." "Exactly." "Cordelia's power comes from mystery, from people filling in blanks with their own assumptions. What if there are no blanks to fill?" The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications of Norah's proposal. Alina was the first to speak. "It's risky. Complete transparency means admitting that there is a personal relationship between you two. It confirms part of what Cordelia is claiming. But it removes the scandal from it," Norah replied. "If we're honest about our feelings, if we show that they developed naturally from mutual respect, then her narrative about manipulation and gold digging falls apart." Julian moved to stand beside her. "What exactly are you proposing?" "It's a joint press conference. We appear together. We tell our story honestly, and we let people judge for themselves whether what they see looks like manipulation or like two people. If you found something real in an unexpected place, and if they judge against us," Norah took a deep breath, "then at least we'll have maintained our integrity. We'll know that we didn't compromise who we are to win a public relations battle." Julian was quiet for a long moment, and Norah could see him weighing the risks and benefits with the strategic mind that had built his empire. Finally, he nodded. "We do it," he decided. "But we do it right. Full transparency, professional presentation, and we stick to the truth, no matter what questions they ask." The press conference was scheduled for 6 o'clock that evening, giving Julian's team just enough time to arrange the hotel's grand ballroom and notify every major news outlet. As word spread that Julian Rosmore himself would be addressing the scandal directly, the media attention intensified to fever pitch in the hours leading up to the conference. Norah and Julian prepared by going over their story, making sure they were aligned on every detail. There would be no rehearsed answers or carefully crafted sound bites. Just two people telling the truth about how they had met and what had developed between them. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked, as they waited in the hotel manager's office, listening to the crowd of reporters settling into the ballroom. "No," Norah admitted. "But I'm sure about us. And I'm sure that hiding from the truth never makes anything better. What if this destroys my business? Then we'll build something new. Isn't that what you told me last night?" Julian smiled, remembering his own words. You're throwing my optimism back at me. I learned from the best. When they entered the ballroom, the explosion of camera flashes was blinding. Every seat was filled, and reporters lined the walls. The noise was deafening until Julian approached the podium, and the room gradually quieted. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I called this press conference because I believe that truth is always preferable to speculation, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be." He gestured for Norah to join him at the podium. "This is Norah Chen. 48 hours ago, she was wrongfully accused of theft by her former employer. Today, she's been accused of manipulating me for financial gain. Both accusations are false, and I'm here to explain why." Julian told their story chronologically, starting with their first meeting at the shopping plaza. He described witnessing her help, the elderly woman, being impressed by her character, and then learning about her employment with the Ashworths. "When I saw Norah being publicly humiliated based on false accusations, I intervened because I had evidence that proved her innocence," Julian continued. "But my decision to offer her employment was based on qualities I had observed in her character, not on any personal attraction." "And the personal attraction?" called out a reporter from the back of the room. Julian glanced at Norah, who nodded encouragingly. "The personal attraction developed naturally, as it does between any two people who discover they share common values and genuine compatibility. There was no manipulation, no calculated seduction. There was simply two people getting to know each other and realizing they had found something worth pursuing."
"Oh, Miss Chen."
Another reporter called out. "What do you say to people who believe you targeted Mr. Rosmore specifically because of his wealth?" Norah stepped closer to the microphone, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "I would say that those people are entitled to their opinion, but they're wrong. When I met Julian at the shopping plaza, I had no idea who he was. I was simply grateful to encounter kindness from a stranger during a humiliating moment." "You must have recognized him," a reporter pressed. "I didn't," Norah replied honestly. "I was so focused on cleaning up the mess I had made and getting back to work that I barely looked at his face. It wasn't until the next day that I learned his identity." "You expect us to believe that you felt no excitement about dating a billionaire?" Norah considered the question carefully. "I would be lying if I said his success wasn't impressive. But what attracted me to Julian wasn't his money, it was his character. The way he treated that security guard who was harassing me. The way he stood up for someone he barely knew. The way he listens when other people talk, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak." The questions continued for over an hour, covering every aspect of their relationship and the accusations against them. Julian and Norah answered each one honestly, never contradicting each other, never seeming defensive or evasive. Finally, a reporter asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Mr. Rosmore, given the scandal this relationship has caused, do you regret getting involved with Miss Chen?" Julian was quiet for a moment, and Norah felt her heart stop as she waited for his answer. "I regret that Norah has been subjected to public humiliation and false accusations," he said finally. "I regret that private moments between us have been twisted into something sordid and calculating. But I don't regret meeting her, offering her employment, or falling in love with her." The room erupted with follow-up questions, but Julian raised his hand for silence. "That's all we have to say. On this matter, we've told you our truth. How you choose to interpret it is up to you." As they left the podium together, Norah felt a sense of completion. They had done everything they could to control their own narrative. The rest was beyond their influence. The response was swift and decisive within hours. Major news outlets were running fact-checking pieces that confirmed Julian's evidence about the forged documents and non-existent police reports. Social media sentiment began shifting as people watched the press conference. Saw two people who appeared genuinely in love, rather than a calculating seductress and her victim. The final blow to Cordelia's credibility came when investigators, prompted by Julian's revelations, discovered that she had paid substantial sums to the private investigator who had fabricated the documents. When confronted with evidence of her deception, Cordelia's lawyer advised her to cease all public statements and prepare for potential criminal charges related to fraud and defamation. 6 months later, Norah stood in the boardroom of Rosmore International, leading a presentation about the company's new education initiative. She had completed her degree through the company's scholarship program while working as Julian's assistant, proving herself to be everything he had believed she could be. The hostile questions from board members had long since ceased. Norah had earned their respect through competence, dedication, and results. The scandal that had once threatened to destroy both their reputations had become a footnote in their larger story of success and partnership. "Excellent presentation," Julian said. As the board members filed out of the room, "The foundation is going to change a lot of lives." "It already has," Norah replied, thinking of her mother, whose successful treatment had been possible because of Julian's support, and who was now living comfortably in a beautiful assisted living facility. Julian moved to stand beside her at the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city where their story had begun. "Any regrets?" Echoing the reporter's question from months earlier. "Just one," Norah said, turning to face him. "What's that?" "I regret that it took a crisis to bring us together. I wish we could have met under different circumstances." Julian smiled and pulled her into his arms. "I don't. If we had met at some charity gala or business dinner, we would have been different. You might have been impressed by my wealth, and I might have missed seeing your character. Sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." As they stood there together, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, Norah reflected on how completely her life had changed. She had gone from scrubbing floors to running educational programs, from being publicly humiliated to being respected for her achievements, from having no prospects to having unlimited possibilities. But more than any external change, she had discovered something she had never expected to find. She had found someone who saw her not as she appeared to be, but as she had the potential to become. Someone who had believed in her when she had stopped believing in herself. "I love you," she said, the words still feeling new and wonderful every time she spoke them. "I love you too," Julian replied, his arms tightening around her. "And I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Norah's heart leap into her throat. "Julian, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago," he said, dropping to one knee. "Norah Chen, you have transformed not just your own life, but mine as well. You've shown me what it means to choose love over fear, truth over convenience, and integrity over advantage. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire that caught the light from the city below and scattered it in brilliant sparks. But what took Norah's breath away wasn't the diamond. It was the expression on Julian's face. Pure love, complete certainty, and absolute commitment to their shared future. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course. Yes." As Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Norah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with humiliation and false accusations. It had been tested by scandal and public scrutiny. But it ultimately led to something neither of them had expected to find. They had found each other. And in doing so, they had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the darkest moments. When two people choose to believe in each other despite what the rest of the world might think, outside the windows, the city spread out before them like a sea of possibilities. Inside the boardroom, two people who had been strangers just months before planned a future together, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as partners, and somewhere across the city. In a mansion that was now empty because its owners were facing fraud charges and bankruptcy, the marble floors that Norah had once scrubbed gleamed in the moonlight, a reminder of how far she had traveled and how much she had overcome. The end *like. This video, if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales. And share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.